And to react to this news, we bring in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez. And John, we thought this was just a matter of time, right, when it had leaked out. Now it is pretty much official. What's your reaction to James Harden going to Cleveland? Harden going to Cleveland is not something that I had on my bingo card when he started out in his NBA career.
Yeah, or even just 2 days ago, right? I mean, because the Clippers have been playing much better since December 20th. This took a lot of people off guard. It took you, me, the NBA, and certainly the Clippers. Now, maybe it shouldn't because of James Harden's history, right? He asked out of basically every team he's ever been on except for the Thunder. It didn't go well in Houston. He wanted to go to Brooklyn. He goes to Brooklyn. It doesn't go well there. He wants to go to Philly. When he gets to Philly, he's reunited with one of his best buddies, Daryl Morey, until Daryl Morey's not his best buddy anymore, and he calls Daryl Morey a liar, and he forces his way to LA. And now all of a sudden, because he's got a player option next year for $42.3 million that he'd like to decline and get more money, he looks around and goes, well, even though the Clippers have had the best record in the NBA since mid-December, 17-5, not enough for me. What I want is a little bit more security. I want some more years. So let's get me to a team where I have a chance to win, and that might also pay me. And that evidently is the Cleveland Cavaliers. What I wrote about today, Chris, and what I'm a little surprised about is with the history of James Harden, even though he remains a really good player, a top 25 player in the NBA, at some point, these teams that keep putting their hands up and going, yeah, I want in on the James Harden experience. Did you not see all the other stops that happened before this? But I guess the Cavs are saying that they'd rather have him than kind of hope that Darius Garland, who's been hurt for a while, is going to get healthy sooner than later.
So on the topic of James Harden, it's, as you pointed out, right, and not sure how long it's going to last. So how long it's going to last. If you're the Cavaliers, you're hoping that, listen, you strike gold in this season, pair him up with Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and they win a title because you just don't know how long it's going to last. What do you think about the fit with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden as your backcourt duo?
I mean, they're scoring in bunches, right? I mean, Donovan Mitchell has talked about the fact that he could use some help in terms of, being on the ball, scoring the ball. There's been a lot of offensive firepower and a lot of shouldering the offensive load that Donovan Mitchell has been asked to do this season because of injuries up and down the roster, including and especially to Darius Garland, who's only played 26 games because of a toe injury. Evan Mobley, last year's Defensive Player of the Year, he's been in and out of the lineup. And so Donovan Mitchell has been asked to do a lot. Now, James Harden, he's been available. He's been a good scorer. He's an excellent passer. That's going to really up the offensive oomph for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, you look in the Eastern Conference, right? Like, Cleveland has been pretty uneven this season, but they're now just starting to find their way. So I think just having somebody of James Harden's caliber in the lineup does wonders for the Cavs. And I think they probably look at the East and go, look, it was disappointing last year when they get bounced out of the playoffs. They come in this season thinking that they're the favorites in the Eastern Conference. Nope, that's not the case. They're just now into the top 6 in the Eastern Conference where they're looking around going, okay, maybe we can get home court advantage in the first round. Top 4 seed would be good for them. So they think, okay, well, we're not going to wait around on Darius Garland, even though he's a decade younger than James Harden. We're going to bring in James Harden. And as you said, Chris, roll the dice on maybe trying to win something this year.
Yeah, trying to win it this year. So obviously they want immediate results. And, James Harden, listen, he's made enough money for both of us combined and then some over his tenure, right? But what do you think about his contract situation and how this factors into the Cavaliers agreeing to this deal? Because, again, he's 36, man, and we know he's playing really good ball. But do you feel like this is going to end well for the Cavaliers?
Well, I mean, does it end well for any team that picks up James Harden, right? I mean, I rattled off all the previous stops where it didn't end well in Houston. It didn't end well in Brooklyn when he wanted to go and be reunited with his buddy KD. And then it didn't end well in Philadelphia when he was reunited with his former best friend and former general manager, Daryl Morey. And then it didn't end well with Kawhi Leonard here in Los Angeles. So the odds are it's not going to end well in Cleveland either. Now, in terms of his money, he has a player option next year for $42.3 million. I think what happens right now is the Cleveland Cavaliers want to kick the tires on this thing and see how it looks with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden in that backcourt. You didn't have to move on from Evan Mobley. You still have Jared Allen. That's a pretty talented first 4, right? But if they decide that, they don't want to pay James Harden, who's 36, will be 37 this summer, maybe he picks up the option. Now, he doesn't want to do that. Part of the reason why I suspect he forces his way out of LA is he is now at 36 years old on the very back end of his career. And what he's looking for is years over money, right? He wants another contract, one more deal to carry him into retirement, and then he can wash his hands of the NBA and move along. But we'll see whether or not the Cavs are willing to pay those extra years. The Los Angeles Clippers, I think rightly, a team that is really old, even though they're playing better now since December, I think they rightly looked at this thing and went, the window on this, whatever this thing is that we put together that started off slow and is playing better now, it's not going to be open for very long. And James Harden wants those extra years. We don't want to give it to him because we're going to have to rebuild. We'll see whether or not the Cleveland Cavaliers do it, though.
Yeah, James Harden always looking for some extra money. Hey, listen, I don't blame him. It's just a matter of like, hey, man, do you want to win a title? Because the way he's bounced around, it just doesn't have to add up. I mean, there have been different circumstances. We can go on and on. But let's talk about Darius Garland, okay? We thought maybe Donovan Mitchell, Garland, that could be the future of this Cavs backcourt for perhaps years to come, but really struggled with injuries, especially the last couple of years. What are the Clippers, or better yet, what should they expect to be getting from Darius Garland when he's actually healthy?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, you're going to try to keep this momentum going. They're 17-5 since the middle of December. You're going to try to keep the momentum going. What you're hoping is that he gets healthy sooner than later because he's only played 26 games with a toe injury. But long term, he's a decade younger than James Harden. Right now, he's owed another 2 years and $87 million, but their hopes obviously are he's going to be around once they decide to strip this thing down and try to rebuild, that he'd be a component of it. And also, I thought if there were going to be picks going in any direction, that the picks would be going to Cleveland, not the other way around. So they get a second-round pick out of this thing too. Not bad business for the Los Angeles Clippers, especially because in addition to be a decade younger than James Harden, he's a two-time All-Star. And when he's healthy, Darius Garland is really good. Now, the NBA is littered with really good ball-dominant lead guards, right? Darius Garland is just one of those guys. But for 10 years younger, yeah, you'll roll the dice on Darius Garland and hope that he's a component in your rebuild when you get to that stage.
So you're safe to say that they won't be winning a title with Darius Garland and Kawhi Leonard out there, huh?
I mean, the West is really loaded, right? And look, when this whole thing got reported initially, John Collins was beside himself. I don't know why. I don't know if John Collins was evidently unaware of all the things that had happened with James Harden previously, but his whole thing was, we're playing really good. We figured it out. We have a chance now. Maybe they do, but there's so many teams that they have to climb over in order to really make a run in the Western Conference. And even if they just had James Harden and they kept that thing going, I mean, are they better than Oklahoma City, the Nuggets, the Rockets, the Wolves? I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of teams here. I mean, we have to see what happens with the Warriors still. Maybe they go and get Giannis. So look, they're playing better basketball, but the chances of them winning a championship with Darius Garland or James Harden or anybody and Kawhi Leonard are slim in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but the chances are better for James Harden to win a championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially with the way the East is set up. We'll see if that does come to fruition. John Gonzalez always giving us the best and brightest insight right here on HQ. Appreciate you, man. So James Harden still searching for that title. He's second all time for most career points without a title, 28,805 points. Only trailing Karl Malone, who had 36,928 during his time in the NBA. And for more reaction to this blockbuster trade, we bring in CBS Sports NBA writer Sam Quinn. And Sam, first off, didn't see this happening whatsoever for a long time, but there are tricklings about it. What's your first thought seeing that James Harden is going to Cleveland for Darius Garland?
My first thought is that the Cavs were crazy, and then as I sat with it for the last day or so, it started to come into focus for me a little bit more. I think what this tells us about Darius Garland is that Cleveland just flat out didn't trust him to stay healthy. Last season was the first time in his entire career that he'd played 70 games. Of course, the toe injury really cost him in the postseason. He wasn't the same guy. He didn't play well earlier this season. He'd been in and out of the lineup with the toe injury. Started to play a little bit better, but he's now been out the last couple of weeks. I think at the end of the day, Cleveland just decided we can't trust him to stay on the floor. And if we're paying him max money, he's extension eligible in the offseason. That just isn't a tenable situation for us. We have a supermax deal for Donovan Mitchell coming in the offseason, or rather in the 2027 offseason. We just signed Evan Mobley to a new max deal. We can't afford to keep somebody like this if he's not going to be on the floor. James Harden, for all of his foibles, despite his age, does tend to be durable. So I think the logic here for Cleveland is that they're getting somebody who can keep them in the mix this year. Small guards, obviously, we saw this with Trae Young, not generating the same trade returns that they used to. So they probably looked at this and said, we could maybe trade for a bad contract and get some picks back that way, or we can get somebody who can keep us afloat, keep us in the championship picture. That's what they did. And I mean, look, it's a rare sort of trade where you trade for somebody a decade older than your guy. When you look at it through that narrow lens, I think it does make a little bit of sense.
Okay, so you think it makes a little bit of sense. How about on the floor, right? With Donovan Mitchell, you know what I'm saying? He needs more production, obviously, with Darius Garland being unreliable, having James Harden in that lineup, running the offense to a degree that should alleviate some of the pressure. But what do you think about the fit with Mitchell and Harden specifically?
I like it. Donovan Mitchell has always been his best as a shooting guard, right? Sometimes in the NBA, when you're a high usage scorer like Mitchell is, you're kind of pigeonholed into that primary ball handler role. You're running an offense. I think he's better when he plays next to another playmaker. And James Harden is obviously a Hall of Fame playmaker. You know, the bigs in Cleveland, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, they're never going to have easier shots than they will with James Harden. He's going to make them a lot better. Cleveland's bench offense, when Donovan Mitchell was on the bench, was bad for most of this year. Harden is going to be able to keep them afloat. They should be able to make it through 48 minutes in every game, always having an all-star level shot creator on the floor. Donovan Mitchell isn't going to have to carry that huge burden by himself anymore. There's a ton of shooting. You know, James Harden has always thrived with a lob threat big and a lot of shooting around him. He'll have both in Cleveland. The fit offensively is very good, and defensively, he's replacing someone in Darius Garland who's also not a great defender. Harden at least is a lot bigger. He's got those quick hands. He generates deflections, generates turnovers. I think this makes Cleveland a better team this season.
Do you think it makes them so much better that they could compete for an NBA championship given how the East is? I mean, I know the Pistons, they're the 1 seed right now, but do you feel like this is enough to get them over that hump?
There is no team in the Eastern Conference right now that genuinely scares me. The Pistons added Kevin Huerter today, and that's helpful. I don't know if they're going to be able to score enough in the playoffs to say they're a clear Eastern Conference favorite. The Knicks have been up and down all season. The Celtics, obviously, without Jason Tatum at full strength, I don't know if I trust that supporting cast. You go up and down the East, and unless a Giannis trade happens that really drastically changes the landscape, there's not that one elite team. And I think part of the motivation for Cleveland doing this and putting so many chips into this year and next year with the 36-year-old Harden was they saw that opportunity as well. They're looking at this and saying, we have a chance when Boston isn't itself, when Indiana is itself. The Pacers destroyed them last year. The Pacers aren't in the mix this year. I think they looked at that and said, let's really go for it this year and next. And then after that, when Harden's contract expires in 2027, then we'll take a look at the longer term and kind of figure out what comes next. But they think they have a chance to win the championship. You don't trade for a 36-year-old James Harden unless you do.
Yeah, so you think that it's more likely, or you think it's likely that they might give him that extension, that deal that he wants, that the Clippers probably weren't going to give it to him because, as most reasonable people, it's like, look, you're 36 years old, yeah, you playing good ball, but we're not sure how much longer you're going to be able to do this and if it's going to end in a championship for the Clippers.
Yeah, I think the Clippers, they've been really earmarking cap space in 2027. That's when Giannis Antetokounmpo, well, if he doesn't extend, will be a free agent. Nikola Jokic as well. A number of other high-profile players. I think they've been planning to rebuild their team at that point. James Harden also only has a partial guarantee on his contract for next season. It's a mutual option, but if he picks up his player option, he can get waived at only $13 million. I think at the very least, Cleveland's plan is to pick him up next season, keep him at that $40 million or so cap figure. I don't know if they're going to extend him beyond that, but they can play that by ear. And if you look at the alternative with Darius Garland, somebody at his age is going to expect an extension that's going to take him, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. I think it's easier to play it year to year with James Harden. With the Clippers, that's what he'd done. He hadn't been signing long contracts. He'd been re-signing in the offseason. I think he should at least be able to get paid next season. And then after that, we'll see where he is, because, when you're 37, 38, it's just hard to predict what your performance is going to look like.
It's hard to predict what your performance is going to look like, and it's really hard to predict like which team James Harden is going to be on, right, from year to year, where it's like, okay, I don't like the situation, I need to get out. Don't like that situation, need to get out. And he's seemingly getting everything he wants. Of course, he's going to want another extension from the Cavaliers, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For Darius Garland and the Clippers, does this really signal like the future of the team in terms of having a rebuild? Like we're not sure about Kawhi Leonard and how much longer he has. Injuries have always been an issue, even though he's been great when healthy. Like, where are the Clippers going with this move?
Yeah, I think this is a minor miracle for the Clippers, frankly. They trade a 36-year-old for a 26-year-old when they're the oldest team in the league. Look, I know they've been playing very, very well lately. They sort of fought their way back into the playoff picture, but nobody had any illusions about this. They weren't winning the championship this year. They were going to be a play-in team, and they were probably, if they got into the playoffs, going to get smacked around in the first round by the Thunder or the Nuggets, and that was going to be that. They had no long-term direction. They were built around two all-stars in their mid-30s. They had to do something to give themselves a long-term direction. Darius Garland is not, Victor Wembanyama.
Right.
He's not Luka Doncic, but he's an all-star who's 26. If you can get him re-signed, you get Ivica Zubac there as your long-term center. Those are at least two building block players that might not be able to be the best player on a championship caliber team, but who could be building blocks for you for whatever comes next. And then, look, you're Los Angeles. You're a very attractive recruiting market. Players tend to want to live in Los Angeles. So could you then use Garland and Zubac, stay afloat for a few years, and then in a few years say, hey, star free agent wing X, star defensive player Y, whoever it is, don't you want to come play with Darius Garland? Don't you want to come play with Zubac? Don't you want to live in LA? I think that's the plan for the Clippers. I don't know that was possible without getting a player as good and as young as Darius Garland.
All right, so two new chapters for the Cavaliers and the Clippers. Cavaliers getting James Harden, and the Clippers going with Darius Garland. Sam Quinn, always appreciate the insight, man. Take care. So the Beard is the second all-time career point scorer without a title, only trailing Karl Malone, who's put up 36,928. James Harden, now a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Unreal.
My grade for the Cleveland Cavaliers will be a C. They took a big risk trading a 26-year-old for a 36-year-old, but they wanted to get off of Darius Garland's contract. They didn't trust his durability. I don't think there was a better offer out there, given how little teams seem to be interested in small guards. Getting James Harden at least keeps them in the championship picture this year. It raises long-term questions, but they should be able to compete for the East with James Harden. So all things considered, considering the injuries to Darius Garland, I think this makes sense. It's just a big risk. Ready? I'm giving the Clippers an A. They had no other access to a player this good and this young than trading James Harden. It didn't even seem like a Harden trade would net this much. If you would have told me a month ago the Clippers had access to a Darius Garland type talent, I would have said you were crazy. But they got somebody who can be a pillar of their next team as they pivot away from Kawhi Leonard in the years to come. And they didn't have to give up any draft picks to do so. In fact, they got a second-round pick to do it. Going from a 36-year-old to a 26-year-old, given how old that team was and how bleak their future looked, is just an absolute godsend. It's a great trade for the Clippers, even factoring in the injury risk for Darius Garland.